Hello once again, I'm Don Jackson with the heartbeat of the internet. It's not ghosts that we should concern ourselves with. Those who haunt are oftentimes very much alive. Nathaniel Hawthorne, in the classic The Scarlet Letter, wrote, "There is a fatality, a feeling so irresistible and inevitable that it has the force of doom, which almost invariably compels human beings to linger and haunt, ghost-like, the spot where some great and marked event has given the color to their lifetime. And still, the more irresistibly, the darker the tinge that saddens it." It's true. We only think of the dead haunting a place, but more often than not, it's the living who return again and again to be close to the place where memories were made. It could be a certain restaurant that two people dined at during the beginning of their love affair, where the very private intimacies of their lives were first shared over dinner. Long after the relationship ends, one of them might choose to return and linger, hoping each time they enter the door, the person they miss will be there, doing the very same thing, looking to recapture that moment once more. Some favorite haunts during this program. This is the heartbeat of the internet. Nathaniel Hawthorne also wrote, "What other dungeon is so dark as one's own heart? What jailer so inexorable as oneself?" Eric Maple, in his 1971 book, Superstitions and the Superstitious, wrote, "Rural ghosts are perhaps not so plentiful today as in the past, when every crossroads was haunted. Nor are there as many phantom coaches hovering near bridges and castle ruins. There once was in the country a complete establishment of specters that continued their hauntings for centuries on end, quite undisturbed by time and unthreatened by the site developer. Now they display a growing tendency to vanish without trace, particularly the horses which once roamed the fields at night." End quote. The haunted places today could be a favorite bench in the park, a strip of sand along the beach, or the address your ex-love called home. You don't even have to make the journey outside your door to the place you shared together. Old lovers' ghosts have a way of finding you, no matter where you are. The sound of the wind in the trees, or the rain on a window, can herald the arrival of these ghosts, and so begins the haunting all over again. These are just some of the people who haunt these places, and the faces they'll never forget. Because of you, in gardens of blossoming flowers, I ache from the perfumes of spring. I have forgotten your face. I no longer remember your hands. How did your lips feel on mine? Because of you, I love the white statues drowsing in the parks. The white statues that have neither voice nor sight. I have forgotten your voice, your happy voice. I have forgotten your eyes. Like a flower to its perfume, I am bound to my vague memory of you. I live with pain that is like a wound. If you touch me, you will do me irreparable harm. Your caresses enfold me like climbing vines on melancholy walls. I have forgotten your love, yet I seem to glimpse you in every window. Because of you, the heady perfumes of summer pain me. Because of you, I again seek but the signs that precipitate desires, shooting stars, falling objects. Poem called Love by Pablo Neruda. A haunting of the living world is not a pretty thing. Sara Teasdale was stirred to what she thought was a haunting. I thought of you when I was wakened by a wind that made me glad and afraid of the rushing, pouring sound of the sea that the great trees made. One thought in my mind went over and over while the darkness shook and the leaves were thinned. I thought it was you who had come to find me. You were the wind. Sometimes the ghosts seem so real. This is an excerpt from For One More Day by Mitch Albom. My mother pulled on her white tweed coat and shook her shoulders beneath it, letting it settle. A few lines later, the author of The 5 People You Meet in Heaven writes, "Do you want to walk by the lake, Charlie?" she said. "It's so nice this time of day." I nodded speechlessly. She kept walking, inspecting the grass. "You know, for 3 years after I married your father, I wished for a child. In those days, 3 years to get pregnant, that was a long time. People thought there was something wrong with me. So did I." She exhaled softly. "I couldn't imagine a life without children. Once I even... Wait, let's see." She guided me toward the large tree on the corner near our house. This was late one night when I couldn't sleep. She rubbed her hand over the bark as if unearthing an old treasure. Ah, still there. I leaned in. The word please had been carved into the side. Small, crooked letters. You had to look carefully, but there it was. Please. You and Roberta weren't the only ones who carved, she said, smiling. What is it? A prayer. For a child? She nodded. For me? Another nod. On a tree? Trees spend all day looking up at God. I made a face. I know. She lifted her hands in surrender. You're so corny, Mom. She touched the bark again, then made a small sound. She seemed to be considering everything that happened since the afternoon I came into the world. I wondered how that sound would change if she knew the whole story. So, she said, moving away, now you know how badly someone wanted you, Charlie. Children forget that sometimes. They think of themselves as a burden instead of a wish granted. She straightened and smoothed her coat. I wanted to cry. A wish granted? How long had it been since anyone referred to me as anything close to that? I should have been grateful. I should have been ashamed of how I'd turned my back on my life. Instead, I wanted a drink. I craved the darkness of a bar, the low wattage bulbs, the taste of that numbing alcohol as I watched the glass empty, knowing the sooner it got in me, the sooner it would take me away. I stepped toward her and put my hand on her shoulder. I half expected it to cut right through like you see in ghost movies. But it didn't. It rested there, and I felt her narrow bones beneath the fabric. You died, I blurted out. A sudden breeze blew leaves off a pile. You make too much of things, she said. Norman McLachlan wrote, "Eventually all things merge into one, and a river runs through it." The river was cut by the world's great flood and runs over rocks from the basement of time. On some of the rocks are timeless raindrops. Under the rocks are the words, and some of the words are theirs. I am haunted by waters. End quote. Yes, I could see how a secretive place near water might be a haunt of something or other. John Quinn from 1 Square Mile on the Atlantic coast, published by Walker, wrote, "The sight, sound, and scent of the Earth's living waters have since time immemorial had a deep and profound appeal to the great majority of humanity. The vast ocean and the multitudes of rivers, great and small, that serve it, occupy a primeval, spiritual place in the collective consciousness. So much so that wherever there is a shoreline, there will be people. Whether to stand at the edge of the sea on a summer day and simply gaze upon the mysterious and primal deep for a few minutes, or to dream of a happy home by the riverside. The presence of water speaks to the heart in a timeless and intimate way." Kino Shirazuki wrote, "Out in the marsh reeds, a bird cries out in sorrow, as though it had recalled something better left forgotten." Haunted waters? Maybe. Thomas S. Collier wrote, "When high the sun in noonday glory rides, where willows keep the lake's green margin cool, the speckled trout amid their shadow hides, and dragonflies haunt every shaded pool." And it was Milton who wrote these famous lines, "And pomp and feast and revelry, with mask and antique pageantry, such sights as youthful poets dream on summer eves by haunted stream." The thoughts of Aubrey Blanford once more returned to those earliest memories of France and of Provence. They were wonderfully pristine always, as if only yesterday. There they were, for example, lying in the pond among the open lilies, with the cool lapping water up to their throats, breathing in the silences of the abandoned garden, which, like the house itself, was full of presences which would have been real ghosts if only they had been visible. Doors which opened and shut of their own accord. Footsteps on the main staircase at midnight. Voices which whispered names so softly that it was always possible to attribute the noise to the rustle of ivy in the changing wind. With shifts of temperature, when the heat from the kitchen rose to the first floor, all the cupboards creaked and burst open as if to embrace one. In the dense foliage of the garden, there was always a flickering of things just seen out of the corner of the eye. When one turned and looked directly, there was nothing. And there was one loose tile on the footpath where every night at dusk one heard a footfall. Someone passed and made it click. Sometimes, if you opened the cellar door, a black cat flowed out, which answered to no name. No blandishment, no caress. It made its way softly through the hall to disappear by a side door. An animal, or the ghost of one? It was like a portfolio of sketches of suave postures, something to grace a fashion plate. An excerpt from Lydia by Lawrence Durrell, published in 1979 by the Viking Press. I thought that in this program we should visit some places that may truly be haunted, and haunts of the heart, where it is said that the ghosts still roam the hallways and stairs of the mind, still tormenting those who were loved. Angela Carter, writing in The Lady of the House of Love, said, "She herself is a haunted house. She does not possess herself. Her ancestors sometimes come and peer out of the windows of her eyes, and that is very frightening. She has the mysterious solitude of ambiguous states. She hovers in a no-man's land between life and death, sleeping and waiting." One by one, in the moonlight there, neighing far off on the haunted air, the unicorns come down to the sea. Conrad Aiken, from Evening Song. And in the end, maybe your haunted place is not as frightening as it appears. This was written by Helen Gray Cohn, and I think a perfect way to end our webcast. To the wall of the old green garden, a butterfly, quivering, came. His wings on the somber lichens played like a yellow flame. He looked at the gray geraniums and the sleepy 4 o'clocks. He looked at the low lanes bordered with the glossy growing box. He longed for the peace and the silence and the shadows that lengthened there, and his wee wild heart was weary of skimming the endless air. And now, in the old green garden, I know not how it came, a single pansy is blooming, bright as a yellow flame. And whenever a gay gust passes, it quivers as if with pain, for the butterfly soul that is in it longs for the winds again. Good night, sweet dreams. I'm Don Jackson.